G'day fam, my name is Nick. I got a 50 in Health and Human a few years ago, and I wanted to give a few tips on kind of how to do that. I know that it can be kind of daunting going into exams, not really knowing where you're sitting or what you're on track for, but I just want to give a few tips on kind of how to maximize your marks from now until the end of your exam. So number one tip, and something that it staggers me that people don't do year after year, is use the study design. And I know that you might hear that and think, well, obviously I've heard that all before, but I mean really use it. So like really use the study design. So what I did, for example, is go through every single dot point in the study design, and I simply wrote as much as I could about each dot point. So this has two benefits in my mind. Number one, if you really know your stuff, it's a really big confidence boost. You can go through and know very meticulously that you're on top of the entire course, you're not missing anything. And you can also make links between different dot points. It makes it really, really clear how the entire course is interlinked. The second benefit is if you get to a dot point where you struggle and you can't think of what to write, or you can only write a couple of sentences, then that's highlighted as something that you should really work on. And that's golden information between now and the end of your exams. Everybody will have weaknesses in different parts of the course, and if you can identify what you're not so strong at, then that's actually a really good thing, because it means you can work on that particular kind of area or topic of content. Number two tip, the new study design is a bit of a spanner in the works, and it's always a bit annoying being the first year for a new study design. And I understand that it's probably frustrating with kind of a perceived lack of resources and stuff, but keep this in mind, everybody is in the same position. So you're not actually really disadvantaged at all. It might make it harder to feel like you have a complete grasp on the course, but that's the same for everybody else in the state. So you're not actually really disadvantaged. But what I'll say about the new study design is they haven't changed the entire course, right? They have made some pretty fundamental changes, but there are still heaps of resources out there that you can use and that can be helpful. For example, past practice exams on the VCAL website, yeah, they're not particularly relevant, or at least not fully relevant to the new study design, but there are heaps of really, really good questions in those past exams that you can use for revision. So what I recommend is going through those, kind of cancelling out the ones that are no longer relevant. You can work with your teacher on this and use those remaining questions for revision. It simply makes no sense not to do that. Tip number three, in my opinion, Health and Human is fairly formulaic. And what I mean by that is when you're answering questions, there's almost a template that you can use for different question types, whether that be like a 2-mark question, 6-mark question, whatever it is. And I guess your job is to kind of work out what that formula or template is for you. So by the time that the exam came around, I was pretty comfortable with my question answering techniques, I guess. And I could basically just plug in the relevant words from the case studies or the relevant information for that particular question. So that's something you can really work on when it comes to question answering. Tip number 4, going back to practice exams, so many students have asked me over the years, hey, how many practice exams should I do? How many practice exams did you do to get a 50? How many hours per night should I be studying? Stuff like that. And to be honest, I just don't find them productive questions. And I know that this probably isn't what you want to hear. You might want some concrete answer as to how many practice exams you should do. But let me tell you a really quick anecdote. So when I was in year 12, I reckon I did a good 30 to 40 practice exams for health. And that is a lot of practice exams. And I mean like almost an obsessive amount. You do not need to do that number of practice exams in order to do well in health and human development. And the reason that I say that is that another one of our tutors here at HHD, in fact our head health and human tutor, did 0 practice exams and got a 50 and also got a Premier's Award. So she did better than I did and she did 0 full practice exams. So hopefully that demonstrates that there's no real right answer when it comes to questions like that, and you should just do you. So I guess my recommendation here is to do as many as you feel necessary, whether that be 2 or 5 or 10 or like me, like 40. Do whatever makes you feel content and whatever makes you feel confident walking into that exam room. But what I will say in regard to practice exams is there's really no point of doing them just for the sake of doing them, right? There's no point of really smashing through the practice exams just to be able to say, hey, I've done 10 practice exams. Or just so you can Snapchat your friends saying, hey, like, look at me studying, look at me go, yeah, this is awesome. It doesn't really work like that, right? You probably won't get that much productivity or that much benefit from doing exams in that way. So what I recommend is for any exam that you do attempt, make sure you do it really well. Go through that exam with purpose. Make sure you either mark it or get it marked, and keep track of what you're kind of stuffing up or where you're losing your marks. That is where the improvement will come, not just from doing the exam itself. Cool. Tip number 5, timing in the actual exam is really important. Health and Human, there's so much content, as you know, and to be honest, answering some questions, you could probably take pages and pages to answer them if you really wanted to. So when you do those practice exams, make sure that at least some of them, at least from my perspective, I think at least some of them should be time-bound. So set yourself up with the appropriate amount of time. See how long it takes you to write a response. Because at the end of the day, being able to write a perfect, flawless 6-mark answer, that's fantastic. But if you can't do it within the time conditions stipulated by VCAR, then what's the point, right? Because you'll get to the exam, and on exam day, yeah, you can write that one response, but then you're really shooting yourself in the foot for the other responses. You don't have finite time, and that's something you should really practice or work on before the exam. Cool. Tip number 6, try to make it easy for assessors to give you marks. And there are some really kind of minor things you can do here, really easy things that I think are a good idea. So for example, if I was ever defining something, I'd underline what I was defining. If it was a really long response, I'd underline kind of major parts of that or the most important parts. Try to lay it out nicely on the page, have the paragraphs if necessary. Stuff like that just makes it easy for the assessors to go through and be like, okay, the question is worth 4 marks, and I can see very clearly where those 4 marks come from. 1, 2, 3, 4, correct, full 4 marks. If you just have a big slab of text, then they actually have to go through and be like, okay, like, is this where the mark comes from? Is it from here? And it just becomes a lot harder for them. And it might be a subconscious thing, but honestly, I think making it easy for them just makes a lot of sense. Tip 7, mentioned it earlier, but work on interlinking the course. Make mind maps if you want. The cool thing with Health and Human is the entire course is related to itself and related to other parts of the course. And if you can kind of conceptually understand how those links occur and where the links are, then you can use that in your responses. Tip 8, SAC results. So if at the moment you're really stoked with your SAC results, that's awesome, congrats, that's something you should be proud of. If you're not happy, then you have the right to feel disappointed or upset or whatever else. But either way, I think you should try to put your SAC results kind of to the back of mind. Try not to worry about them too much. And there are a few reasons for this, but primarily, you can't really tell how you're going just from raw marks in SACs. So if you're sitting on like a 70% average, that doesn't actually mean that you're sitting on a 70% average. Right? We don't really care about raw marks when it comes to SACs. The reason for that is that all SACs are moderated in terms of the marks. Obviously, different schools have different SACs, and different schools also mark differently. Some are really lenient, some are really harsh, and so you can't even really compare your SAC results to somebody else who goes to a different school. So try not to get too caught up in the numbers. But this leads me on to tip 9. Do try to remember the feedback that you got from those SACs. So try not to worry about, losing that 20% on the first SAC or whatever, but do think about why you lost those marks and keep track. In fact, if you have the SACs on you still, go back through them through the year. Before the exam, go back through all those SACs and work out why you lost the marks, and make sure you don't make the same mistakes on the exam again. And finally, tip 10, very final tip relates to exam day. Now, in my opinion, the difference between like a 48 and a 49 or a 50 in health and human, or indeed the difference between like a 30 and a 31 or a 32 or a 20 and a 21 or a 22, I think largely just comes down to luck and a bit of fortune on exam day. But if you walk into that exam theatre or the exam hall confident in your preparation and confident in the fact that you can do well and you can smash that exam, then I think you're well on the way to doing so. If you walk in and you're tired and fatigued from staying up all night cramming, you're not in a good position to do well in the first place. You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So what I'd recommend is work really hard up until the exam day, but don't push yourself to the point that you're physically feeling the effects, or indeed mentally feeling the effects, because being able to perform on exam day is a really big thing, obviously, and you need to look after yourself in order to do that. So that were 10 quick tips. I hope you found them at least mildly useful. I'm going to link some more health and human resources below this video. Make sure you check them out. There's heaps of good stuff there from a lot of different users who have done well in the past. And also feel free to ask any questions below as well. All the best for health and human. It's a great subject. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll catch you later.